Hello, this is Salvatore Vinciguerra. Welcome to this video on the Fort Loudoun State Park in Vonore, Tennessee. Fort Loudoun was a British colonial-era fort located in what is now known as Monroe County, Tennessee. Built in 1756 and 1757 to help garner Cherokee support for the British at the outset of the 7 Years' War, the fort was one of the first significant British outposts west of the Appalachian Mountains. The fort was designed by John William G. DeBrum. Its construction was supervised by Captain Raymond DeMere, and its garrison was commanded by DeMere's brother, Paul DeMere. It was named for the Earl of Loudoun, the commissioner of the British forces in North America at this time. Relations between the garrison of Fort Loudoun and the local Cherokee inhabitants were initially cordial, but soured in 1758 due to the hostilities between Cherokee fighters and European settlers in Virginia and South Carolina. After the massacre of several Cherokee chiefs who were being held hostage at Fort Prince George, the Cherokee laid siege to Fort Loudoun in March of 1760. The fort's garrison held out for several months, but diminishing supplies forced its surrender in 1760. Hostile Cherokees attacked the fort's garrison as it marched back to South Carolina, killing more than 24 and taking most of the survivors prisoner. The fall of Fort Loudoun led to an invasion of the Cherokee territory by General James Grant, an important peace expedition to the Overhill Country by Henry Timberlake. The fort was reconstructed in the 20th century based on the detailed descriptions of its design by DeBrum and DeMere and excavations conducted by the Work Progress Administration, the Fort Loudoun Association, and the Tennessee Division of Archaeology. It was designated as a National Historic Landmark in 1965 and is now the focus of the Fort Loudoun State Park. Before visiting the Fort Loudoun State Park, I highly suggest that you call the museum ahead of time to make sure that it's open, because it's very educational to learn about the history of this beautiful place in Tennessee. Inside of the museum, there's a variety of artifacts, not only from the Cherokees or the Native Americans that lived in this area, but also from the British soldiers that lived in this area and on this particular site. They show you how they lived. There's a layout or a model of the actual site, and then they have a few other artifacts. And there's also a movie that lasts about 15 to 20 minutes about Fort Loudoun State Park. When you're done visiting the museum, I highly suggest that you bring a snack or even your lunch and eat it out by Tellico Lake. You can even fish off of the Outer Banks here in this particular area. And while you're doing that, look at the beautiful view that you have, that it overlooks the Appalachian Mountains in the backdrop. Now I'm going to take you on a tour of a replica of Fort Loudoun, and notice that very small doorway at the top of the pathway that I'm walking on, and this is called Sally Port. It's a very small and protected doorway in the wall of the fortification. Through much smaller than a normal gate, it allowed troops to sally or move out of the fort to harass isolated and vulnerable attackers before retreating back into the fort without compromising the defensive strength of the fortification. Construction of the fort began on October 5, 1756. DeBrum's design was more elaborate than a typical frontier fort. The fort was diamond-shaped with bastions at the corners, each of which contained 3 cannons. As the fort was built on a hill slope, 2 of the bastions were atop the hill and 2 were closer to the bottom, with the walls sloping downward. The bastions were named for the King of England, the Queen of England, the Prince of Wales, and the Duke of Cumberland. The walls were 300 feet in length and surrounded by a ditch a yard deep and 10 feet wide, which was planted with a honey locust hedge. The walls consisted of 15-foot upright logs, 8 feet of which extended from the ground at a 15-degree angle. The interior of the fort covered approximately 2 acres and included a powdered magazine, a blacksmith shop, barracks, and officers' quarters and supply buildings. The garrison built drains, troughs for salting beef, a meat house, and a charcoal pit for the blacksmith. The fort was completed on May 30th, 1757. Governor Littleton named the fort after John Campbell, the 4th Earl of Loudoun, who had recently been appointed Commander-in-Chief of the British forces in North America. Now let's take a look at the gunpowder magazine. A gunpowder magazine is a building designed to store the explosive gunpowder in wooden barrels for safety. Gunpowder, until superseded, was a universal explosive used for the military. Most magazines were purely functional and tended to be in remote and secure locations. Now let's take a look inside of the barracks. This is where the soldiers slept. You can see the various bunks that they have inside of here. And there's a fireplace for them to keep warm because this is Tennessee and it would get cold and snow. And now we're going to take a look inside of the storehouse, and this is where they would store dry goods like flour and other items for cooking and other things that they would need. Now we're going to take a look at the blacksmith shop, and it also consists of some other areas which look like they're used for woodworking. A blacksmith is a metalsmith who creates objects from wrought iron or steel by forging metal using tools to hammer, bend, and cut. Blacksmiths produced objects such as gates, grills, railings, light fixtures, furniture, tools, agricultural items, and also cooking utensils and weapons. And in this case, it's a fort, so they would need a blacksmith to help make some of the weapons that some of the soldiers would use. I highly suggest that when you visit the Fort Loudoun State Park, that you visit on a day when they're having either a historical reenactment or some sort of demonstration or tour guide on site. And I find that this is very helpful and makes your day there a little bit more enjoyable. On the day that I went here in the summer, I got to see a group of students observing and watching a historical weapons demonstration.
I've at the shoulder, and hear the command to prime and load. Let's bring the musket over here. I reach into my cartridge box here, and I pull out a cartridge. This has got a charge of powder and a ball. Everything's ready to go. Okay? So, I reach in here, grab a cartridge. Tear a cartridge. Prime my pan first. What's going to happen is I got a piece of flint and steel here, and what happens when flint touches steel? Fire. Get spark. Spark touches black powder, what happens? Pop. The explosion. Boom. So I'm going to close the pan, swing the musket about, and I'm going to load the rest of the powder down into the barrel. Then I take my musket ball, which would be in the bottom of the cartridge here, and the paper wad, and everything goes in the tube. Everything's stuck right here, right now. So how do I get to the bottom?
You did the thing on the right.
I grab the rammer, or today we call it the ramrod, the rammer, and I pack everything down. Now what do? Put this back, because if I don't put this back and I lose it, I have the world's most expensive club. All right, this thing cannot fire without my rammer. One of my most important tools. Okay? So now I go back to the shoulder, and I wait for the command to prime and load. Now, I would have been doing that a lot quicker. Okay? I'm trained to do 3 shots a minute. All right? Which is crazy fast. But today, we're just showing y'all how these are loaded here. Okay? All right, so I need everybody to stick their fingers in their ears if they want to. There you are!
That's loud. I didn't plug my ears.
Okay. If it was raining right now, would I be able to fire this off?
No.
Why?
Raise your hand.
Well, the powder's going to get wet. Okay? And if the powder gets wet, we can no longer use it. It ruins it. Also, when flint and steel gets wet, kind of cause a spark.
Now I'm going to go outside of the southern perimeter of the fort, and as you see, this is a defensive perimeter, and I talked a little bit about the locust hedge before, but it actually helped to impede Indian attacks. And here you see not only the locust hedge, but the chevaux de frise. A dry moat surrounded the fort, and young honey locust trees producing 4-inch thorns were planted in the bottom. The locust trees were planted to impede an attack, much like barbed wire is used today. Although modified for use in the wilderness, similar techniques were employed in forts built throughout Europe in the 1700s. The chevaux de frise, which you see here is this wooden spiky thing in front of the locust hedge, was a defensive obstacle consisting of a portable frame, sometimes just a simple log covered with many iron or wooden spikes. They were principally intended as an anti-cavalry obstacle, but could also be moved quickly to help block a breach and another barrier. Here they are used to fill the gap in the locust hedge at the gates. During a siege, the chevaux de frise would be swung across the opening to further defend the gate. These reconstructed Cherokee dwellings represent the town of Tuskegee, which is now covered by Tellico Lake, and you see the lake in the background of many of the pictures and videos that I'm showing you. This open structure here was the summer house, and the mud structure, which I'm going to take you into, was the winter house. The winter house protected the families from the long cold winter, but was notoriously smoky. The summer house provided comfortable respite during the hot summer days. Sequoyah, inventor of the written form of the Cherokee language, was born in Tuskegee around 1777, 17 years after the fall of Fort Loudoun. If you would like to learn more about the Cherokee scholar Sequoyah, the Sequoyah Birthplace Museum is operated by the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, and it stands just west of the fort on the other side of Highway 360. I would highly recommend visiting both the Fort Loudoun Museum and Historical Site and the Sequoyah Birthplace Museum in the same day, as it kind of goes with one another, and I'll be sharing with you a video of the Sequoyah Birthplace Museum in one of my upcoming videos. The site of the Tellico Blockhouse, an American outpost that operated from 1794 to 1807, is located across the Little Tennessee River to the east of Fort Loudoun. The blockhouse and its associated structures were uncovered by researchers during the Tellico Archaeological Project and are now marked by wooden posts and stones. Several artifacts excavated from the blockhouse site are now on display at the Fort Loudoun Visitor Center. This is Salvatore Vinciguerra. Thank you for watching this video on the Fort Loudoun State Park in Vonore, Tennessee. If you like this video, please like it, subscribe to this channel, and have a great day. Thank you.